The church was steeped in a heavy stillness, the air as frigid as the stone tiles beneath my shoes. I stood alone, clad in a somber black dress, observing the sparse gathering of relatives at my grandfather's funeral. Their faces bore no tears, only the familiar scorn I'd seen before. Their hushed voices carried a bitter edge in the quiet space. "Good riddance to that stingy old man," one cousin muttered under their breath. He got what was coming. My heart froze, a spark of anger flaring within me. They knew nothing of the man who raised me, the man they so carelessly judged. They were merely scavengers, hovering for a share of his supposed wealth. As the pastor concluded his brief prayer and glanced at the nearly empty pews, a question lingered in the silence. Would anyone like to deliver a eulogy? The room fell deathly quiet, the weight of it oppressive. That's when I realized I had to speak. I had to reveal the truth about the harshest man I'd ever known and the torment I endured under his roof. I had to make them see. But I never anticipated what would unfold next. I was just 12, a girl with tangled brown pigtails and a heart brimming with dreams, when my world shattered. My parents, David and Sarah Bennett, were pilots, vibrant souls who laughed freely and loved deeply. I can still picture my father's sturdy shoulders, lifting me high as if I could soar. My mother's voice was a soothing lullaby, her watercolors splashing our modest suburban home with life. Our life was simple but idyllic, movie nights curled up on the sofa, backyard cookouts with neighbors, and our dog, Buster, as much a part of the family as I was. We were content, but I soon learned joy is a delicate thing. A piercing phone call changed everything. 2 pale-faced officers stood at our door, their words a cold, detached report of a plane crash in the mountains. No survivors. My father's plane. My mother was with him. The world dissolved into a haze. I didn't scream or cry. The pain was too vast, a block of ice settling in my chest, numbing me entirely. Then came Aunt Clara, my mother's older sister, with her tight-lipped frown and sharp, calculating eyes. I'd only seen her at family events, always sizing us up. "I'll take the child," she told the social worker, her tone devoid of warmth. I didn't know then that her motives were rooted in greed, hoping to uncover some hidden inheritance. She drove me for hours, the landscape growing bleaker with every mile, until we arrived in a desolate, windswept town with a single stoplight and crumbling buildings. At its edge stood my new home, a dilapidated farmhouse with flaking paint and a rusty tin roof. The first time I saw him, my grandfather, Richard Sterling, was unforgettable. He stood on the porch, tall and gaunt, his steely gray eyes cutting through me as if cataloging my flaws. I braced for a warm embrace or a kind word, anything to ease my grief. Instead, I got a curt nod and a voice that would echo in my nightmares. "You're late, Elizabeth. Don't waste my time." That moment marked the start of my new life. A life of silence, grueling work, and a discipline that could break the strongest spirits. Little did I know, the stern old man I'd been sent to live with was secretly a billionaire. Stepping onto that farm, my days became a relentless cycle of chores and solitude. I quickly learned Grandpa Richard had no patience for warmth or idle talk. The farmhouse was cold, reeking of dust and damp soil. My room was a stark, tiny space with a rigid bed, a plain wooden desk, and a window facing the barn. No soft touches, no comforts, just a small chalkboard on the wall bearing 2 words, "Work hard." My routine was suffocating, like a clock wound too tight. His alarm blared at 5 a.m., his voice thundering down the hall. "Get up, Elizabeth. The sun doesn't wait." I'd bolt awake, heart racing with dread, haunted by flashes of the plane crash and my parents' voices calling my name. There was no room for mourning or dreams. I'd slip into the faded jeans and flannel shirts he provided, then hurry to feed the pigs and muck out the stables. Breakfast at 6 a.m. was a silent affair. He sat at one end of the table, I at the other, the space between us vast and unbridgeable. The meal was plain, oatmeal and toast, eaten without a word. No joyful stories, no laughter like my mother's. Weakness was a sin in his eyes. Once, I dared to complain about my blistered hands after shoveling manure. "My hands hurt, Grandpa," I whispered. His head snapped up, eyes blazing. "Hurt," he growled. "You've lost your parents, And you're whining about work? Toughen up. His words stung, silencing the tears I wasn't allowed to shed. He corrected every misstep, barking at muddy boots or slow eating. Clean it up, this isn't a sty, or hurry up, time's worth more than gold. Forgetting to clear the table was unforgivable. One night, exhausted from milking cows and mending fences, I left the dishes and collapsed into bed. His heavy footsteps woke me. He stood in my doorway, an old leather strap in hand, swinging it with a faint whistle. Clean it now. No one carries your load in this world. Trembling, I washed the dishes in icy water, the splashes mixing with the tears I couldn't cry. I struggled under the weight of my grief, a raw wound that never healed. By day, I buried myself in work to escape it, but at night, in that creaky bed, loneliness consumed me. I'd curl up, whispering my parents' names, praying for sleep to dull the pain. My private torment wasn't just the labor, but the crushing isolation that made me feel like a shadow in a life I didn't belong to. Yet, as months turned to years, something shifted. Amid the sweat and tears, a spark of strength began to grow. I still feared him, still longed for my lost home, but I started to see the farm differently. It wasn't just a cage, it was a classroom, and Grandpa Richard, though merciless, was its teacher. His lessons weren't gentle. They were carved into me through his actions, his unyielding way of life. The first lesson was discipline. Grandpa lived with clockwork precision. At 5 a.m., he was in the stables. At 6, breakfast was served, not a second late. At 8, he plowed fields, rain or shine. Once, I overslept by 10 minutes. He stood at my door, arms crossed, his voice like ice. 10 minutes late is 10 minutes lost. Think life waits for you. I mumbled an apology, rushing to the pig pen in damp boots. I despised his strictness at first, but I began to see its value. When I started waking up on time and finishing my schoolwork early, my world felt less chaotic. His discipline, though brutal, taught me to seize control of my time. The second lesson was perseverance. Grandpa never quit a task. One freezing winter day, snow blanketed the fields, and I assumed he'd rest. Instead, he donned his worn coat and climbed to fix a leaking stable roof. "Grandpa, let's wait till tomorrow," I begged, shivering. His eyes glinted in the lamplight. "If you start something, you finish it. Work doesn't wait for weather." He hammered steadily until the roof was sealed. Soaked and exhausted, I felt a grudging respect. He didn't just work to survive. He lived with relentless determination, like an oak weathering a storm. From then on, when a math problem stumped me or exhaustion tempted me to quit, I pictured him on that roof, pushing me to keep going. Frugality came next. He wasted nothing. Leftover bread was saved, dropped nails collected, with scraps burned for warmth. He kept a tattered notebook, meticulously tracking every expense. Once, I spilled a bottle of milk on the kitchen floor. He didn't shout, just stared at the puddle. "That milk is sweat, Elizabeth. One spill wastes one effort." His calm rebuke shamed me more than any yell. He wasn't cheap. He valued every resource. I began patching my clothes and saving coins from selling hay, learning to treasure every cent. He also taught me honesty and responsibility. "Lying is betraying yourself," he'd say, his voice unyielding. "Is that who you want to be?" I learned to face hard truths. When I asked why he didn't sell the farm for an easier life, he fixed me with a solemn stare. "You don't run from duty, Elizabeth. This land is our legacy. Abandoning it is abandoning yourself." His words struck deep, teaching me that strength meant carrying burdens no matter how heavy. These lessons, forged in the farm's crucible, were his silent gift, shaping me into a woman with a will of iron, not through kindness but through trials as sharp as a blade. But as I neared 18, that strength sparked our greatest clash. The air crackled with tension on the evening of my 18th birthday. I'd received my final report card, a proud array of A's and B's. My heart raced, not with pride, but with hope that he'd finally see me. Clutching my worn art portfolio, I entered the kitchen where he sat with his steaming coffee. I slid the report card across the table. "I got into art school, Grandpa," I said, my voice shaky but resolute. "The best in the state. I want to paint like Mom." He didn't glance at the card. Instead, He reached for unfamiliar college applications. You'll study business, he declared, his tone final. Finance is the only path to security. My blood turned to ice. No, Grandpa. I want to create, to paint. His brows furrowed, eyes darkening. Paint, he scoffed. Childish nonsense. You think daubing colors will keep you fed in old age. His words cut deep, unleashing years of pent-up pain. The loneliness, the resentment of a childhood under his rule erupted. I shoved my chair back, screaming, You're always controlling me. You never care what I want. I've lost everything, lived through hell here, and you never once asked how I felt. He rose, looming over me, his face red, fists clenched. Ungrateful, he roared. I raised you, gave you a home, a future, and you want to toss it away on whims. Have you forgotten all I've done? Tears broke free as I shouted, You didn't give me a future. You stole the one I wanted. You didn't save me. You made me an orphan who slaved for you. He stepped closer, jabbing a finger at my chest. You want freedom? Go. But don't crawl back when you fail. His words shattered my last hope. I fled the kitchen, the house, him, grabbing my backpack, stuffing it with clothes, a notebook, and my parents' photo. I didn't look back as the cold night wind stung my tear-streaked face, the darkness swallowing my steps. I was running, but to where I didn't know. For the first time in years, I was utterly alone. I wandered for hours, the chill and aching legs forcing me to collapse under an oak tree by the road. My anger, once a blazing fire, cooled into a heavy knot of regret. His words, You want freedom? Go, echoed, but so did his lessons, discipline, perseverance, responsibility. He wanted me to survive, to be strong. He was right, running was foolish. As dawn painted the fields in soft golds and grays, I began the long walk back, my backpack heavy, my heart heavier. I pictured facing him, apologizing, promising to attend business school, thanking him for the first time. But when I opened the farmhouse door, an eerie silence greeted me. No ticking clock, no stable sounds. My pulse raced. I found him in the kitchen, motionless on the floor, clutching his leather notebook. Grandpa, I whispered, trembling. He didn't stir. He was gone. The doctor called it a stroke, a quiet exit in the home he'd preserved. 3 days later, the funeral took place under a gray sky, as if the heavens mourned with me. The small church held relatives I barely knew, their whispers cold and callous. The old miser's finally gone, Aunt Clara muttered. Lived alone, died alone. My heart pounded with grief and rage. They didn't know him. To them, he was just a cruel relic. When the pastor asked if anyone wished to speak, silence fell like a blade. Clara stared at her hands. My cousins avoided his gaze. They were there for the will, not for him. That silence cut me deeply, a final insult to a man they never understood. I couldn't let him go unremembered. My legs heavy, I stood, all eyes on me with curiosity and surprise. At the pulpit, my hands shook. I'm Elizabeth, Richard Sterling's granddaughter, I began, voice wavering. I took a breath, ready to share the truth, not of wealth, but of hardship, lessons, and a love I grasped too late. They say he was cruel, I started, voice steadier. And he scolded me for muddy boots, poor grades, for crying over my parents. He woke me at 5 a.m., worked me to exhaustion, never offered comfort. Some relatives nodded, Clara smirking. I ignored them, eyes on the casket. I used to hate him, thinking he didn't care. But I was wrong. The whispers quieted. He taught me discipline by never wasting a moment. Perseverance, like when he fixed the stable roof in a snowstorm. Thrift, because every drop of spilled milk was his effort wasted. Responsibility, because he never abandoned this land, or me. And honesty, even when it hurt. Tears fell, unstoppable. He was the strongest man I knew, shaped by a world that valued toughness over tenderness. I only wish I'd thanked him. I stepped down, trembling, the church silent. My words didn't change their views, but they were my goodbye, my gift to him. A man in a gray suit approached, Robert Thompson, Grandpa's lawyer, holding a worn briefcase. Jameson, he asked. Elizabeth, I corrected. He smiled softly. I'm here about Richard Sterling's will. Every eye turned to me, the vultures alert. He opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. "You're his sole heir," he said calmly. Most here didn't know his true wealth. He looked at me. "Congratulations, Elizabeth." I froze. The man I thought was a poor farmer was a billionaire. Clara's face twisted with fury, her voice shrill. "This is wrong. He lived like a pauper. You tricked him, you snake." The lawyer ignored her, handing me a leather-bound journal. "This is for you, Elizabeth, per his wishes. It's more valuable than any asset." My hand shook as I took it, the leather cool. Opening it, the scent of old paper hit me, like the farm's essence. His neat handwriting filled the pages, not a diary, but fragments of his soul. The first entry, dated after my parents' death, read, "Laura and David died today. Only the girl remains. I must take her in, though I don't know how to raise a child. I only know how to build things." Tears stung as I read his fear, hidden from me. Later entries cut deeper. He wrote of sleepless nights, wondering if his strictness was right. "I don't know how to show love. My father taught me strength, no weakness. I fear she'll hate me." The final entry from our last fight. "Elizabeth is grown. She wants freedom. I want her to have a better life than me. I love her, but I can't say it. If I'm gone, tell her I'm proud. I want her strong, unbreakable." Sobbing, I clutched the journal. He wasn't cruel. He was bound by his era, showing love through actions, not words. His love was a forge, shaping me with fire and hammer. The assets were vast, but this journal was his true legacy. His heart bared too late. Leaving the lawyer's office, journal in hand, I stepped into the pale afternoon light. The scent of hay drifted on the breeze, and I smiled through tears. Grandpa was gone, but his lessons, discipline, perseverance, thrift, responsibility, honesty, and his silent love would stay with me. That night, in the farmhouse's cold kitchen, the oil lamp glowed as I reread his words. "I want her strong, unbreakable." I clenched my fists, feeling his gray eyes on me. "I'll do it, Grandpa," I whispered. "I'll be strong." The next day, I applied to a business school, honoring his practical spirit. University brought freedom, but also challenges. Late nights in the library, hands cramped from notes, I felt like that scolded girl again when projects failed or grades dipped. But his journal steadied me. "If you start something, you finish it." I worked at a coffee shop, bussing tables, living frugally, never wasting a dime. Honesty guided me. I took penalties for late work rather than lying, recalling his words, "Lying is betraying yourself." At 22, I graduated, my degree hard-earned. Instead of returning to the farm, I used his estate to start a logistics company, moving farm goods to markets inspired by his struggles. The business was tough, breakdowns, late payments, spoiled shipments, but his image, fixing that roof in the snow, kept me going. His lessons became my guide, turning my idea into a thriving business, letting me buy a home and build a life I cherish. Today, I stand at his grave, no longer the frightened girl he took in, but a woman who understands his love. His legacy wasn't the money or the farm, but the strength he instilled. He didn't teach with gentle words, but with quiet sacrifice. I lay daisies on his tombstone, the wind stirring the oak leaves, and feel peace, as if we finally understand each other. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whisper. "I won't forget." He, the man both stern and deeply human, lives on in every choice I make, every beat of my heart. Please subscribe to my channel for more stories like this.